and welcome back to another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jay. Super grateful to have you, and I'm super grateful to have the guest I have today. It's going to be an important and insightful conversation that we have lined up for you. So joining me today is Paul Murphy, the creator of Divorce Detox, an innovative online guide. I can read, don't worry, I can read my notes. An innovative online guide designed specifically to support men navigating the multifaceted challenges of divorce. I use big words sometimes. I get confused. Okay. Professionally, Paul has had an impressive career transitioning from being an inner city paramedic to administrative roles in healthcare. He's published over 50 articles, spoken at conferences, and holds degrees in emergency health services, computer information systems, and healthcare administration. He's also a father of 2 thriving adult children. After going through his own divorce over a decade ago, Paul realized there wasn't a comprehensive resource to help men through the emotional, financial, and legal aspects of the process. As you will know here on the Young Dad Podcast, I'm divorced, been through a divorce. Something we've talked about openly and honestly here on many times on the podcast with attorney Jafari, Mr. Nice Guy, and many others as well. So today we're going to talk about digital divorce detox, not a digital detox, a divorce detox, which is aiming to empower men to handle divorce with confidence and clarity. So a little bit about Paul here. First off, Paul, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you before I jump into the next thing.
Thanks so much, Jay. I look forward to it as well, and I look forward to the conversation. Just let it flow naturally. So thank you.
Of course, man. So, Paul, a little bit about your journey. It's both compelling and inspiring. After experiencing the complexities of and emotional turmoil of your own divorce, you recognize a significant gap in resources available to men during this challenging time. And let's be honest, that gap is still ginormous. It's absolutely huge. Determined to make a difference, you paused your really successful writing career in healthcare to develop Divorce Detox, which if someone would have looked at you and said, I'm sure there's people who looked at you and said, what the heck are you doing? Why are you doing that? Are you insane? You're like, yeah, a little bit, probably, maybe, I don't know. A program which is designed to help men transform from one of life's toughest transitions into an opportunity for personal growth. So if you wouldn't mind, take us through a little bit of the before, the during, and the after of how Divorce Detox kind of came to fruition.
Yeah, no, great question. There are probably some people listening going, what is this guy doing? So to that point. So I started the career as a paramedic, and during that time I was writing articles and speaking at conferences, met my girlfriend who became my wife. We get married. I switched from the inner city paramedic stuff to the administrative stuff, still publishing, and then get married, have kids. And then during that process, realize there's some stress and I get laid off. And I lay off number 1. So there's layers to this whole thing. Going through life, and so all of a sudden we realized that our relationship isn't solid. There's differences. People get divorced for various reasons, and we were heading down that path. And so we're going down this path there, and in the middle of divorce, and all of a sudden I got laid off number 2. I'm still doing some articles on the side, still speaking, and then we get done with the divorce. Times have changed, you're divorced on paper, life continues to get laid off number 3. And in 2023, my mentor says to me, what are you doing these days? And I said, well, I'm getting ready to write another article and do that. And she's like, no, we're going to take this a different path. She goes, you've been helping people all your career, all your help. You've gone through some experiences with layoffs, with divorce, which is huge. She says, I'm going to push you to create a program that's going to be a resource for guys to help them get through divorce. And we did some brainstorming as well prior to coming to that specific area. But going through this process, she said, we're going to explore where your interests lie, where your experiences are, and how you take what you have and make it into something. And doing the homework and the research for this whole time conversation, when we did the brainstorming ideas, we realized that, boom, there is divorce, and there's no single resource out there. To this day, it's still scattered. That from a guy's perspective, how do you get from point A, pre-divorce, divorcing, and then post-divorce? And you're never really done being divorced. You're divorced for life, right? And so when we're doing our research, we realized there's a lot of information out there by a variety of individuals, predominantly from a female's perspective, which is fine. And you don't get a lot of guys who want to talk about the inner workings of divorce. And yeah, while there's the nuts and bolts of divorce with, child support, what do you do to the house, and how do you do all that, there's the other part of this thing that a lot of people, at least for myself, I was very ignorant to this, and I was totally underprepared for this. The emotional part, the mindset, and the fact that even though you get divorced on X date when you sign your paper, you're still divorced for life. It never ends. My kids are fully grown, and there's still factors I never considered that I'm encountering. I'm like, whoa. And having a central place for a guy to go to help him through these various stages is why we came up with Divorce Detox. And I've had guys come, I've never seen this, Paul. This is cool because you have this tool now. You can go through and follow this whole thing and use various tools from the program itself to help benefit guys. hopefully be successful from an amicable perspective. But there's areas of the divorce I didn't know about until I got into doing this project, and also ripped off some band-aids on myself with things I may have missed going through my divorce. So that's kind of the high level overview of how the whole thing came together.
That's really cool. And it's so important, right, for us to take what we know, what we've gone through, experience that we had, and essentially, like you have done, create a blueprint for the next person up, for the next
Right.
man up.
Right.
Because divorce happens so crazy often. It spiked over before COVID. It was like right around 40% or so. Post COVID and during COVID, it spiked up to 50, almost 55%. And so more than half of marriages are ending in divorce. I've been divorced.
Sad.
You know, something that carries with you. Like I'm remarried now. I've been remarried for about 8 months now.
Okay.
At the time of this recording,
Congrats.
by the time this come out, it'll be nearly a year. Maybe we'll see how whenever this comes out. But
Sure.
who knows? But you know, it is something that you kind of carry with you, kind of that stank that's always with you, essentially, and you feel it. It's a part of you, unfortunately, and it's something that carries with you no matter what you almost no matter what you try to do, no matter how much therapy or counseling or different things that you go to. Like there's still parts of it that are still going to be there, especially when you get into a new marriage, especially when you get into the as life goes on, essentially. These things are
Absolutely.
gonna like pop up and come up that you're like, oh man, I thought I was past that.
Right? No, I totally agree. And so for myself, some of the things that I underestimated was once the kids grow up and move out of the house and you're divorced, how often do you see your kids? How often are you in touch with your kids? My kids, one's out of state, one is in state in college, but still it's kind of hard at times to keep in touch because you have to let them live their lives. But on the same token, being a divorced parent, there's always going to be a connection there. And how does that play forward? I'm in a relationship times 2 years with a very wonderful female, and she has her son, and even that evolving where it's the first long-term relationship I've been in, where now you're meeting the kiddos of your significant other and how all that plays in, and are you doing it right when you go to meet the kiddo for the first time versus not, and all these you can write it down, you can sit here and talk about it, but until you actually do it, the emotions and the mindset to go with that, at least for me, being I wanted to go smooth, I had a vision in my mind of how it would go, and it went well. I mean, it was a little clunky and awkward, I'll be honest, when I first time I met him, just because we were both trying to figure this whole thing out, like, who are you, dating my mom? And there's me going, hi, I'm dating your mom, I just want to be your friend for now. So to your point, it's there are all these various pieces and it never ends. I mean, again, I know I say it often where you get divorced on X date and you sign a piece of paper. Yeah, you sign a piece of paper, but this is forever going forward. You always have another relationship. You have an ex-spouse. You have ex-in-laws potentially. You may have kids from that relationship. There's all these other things that are still there that, lo and behold, behind the scenes in your brain, maybe doing a dance on emotions and mindset and how that plays out.
100%, especially if you have kids with a person, right? Like that stuff never goes away because kids don't, go away
Right,
at all,
right. They grow up. You little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. And if you are a involved, committed dad, then you're going to be involved in their worlds with what they're experiencing and supporting through that. That doesn't change.
And I hope that the listener listening to this podcast is an involved dad and very much involved with their children. If you're not, then this is your, kind of call to action here to do so and change and to take that step to repairing that relationship and being more involved with your kids. However, there are the situations to where they are stonewalled by a mother who won't let them see the kid, which is very common in the divorce process. Very, very, very common, unfortunately, is that the kids become actually, let's talk about this. The kids become a power play so often in divorce, especially for the mother. You see a lot of just political landscape, we'll say, how kids instantly go to the mother, or the mother gets more custody, the mother gets more time with the children, and the father could be a well and decent guy, working hard, doing great, kind of things like that. And now because he's gone through a divorce or going through a divorce, now he's suddenly unfit to be a father when he's been there for the last, if the kids are 10 years, he's been there for the last 10 years, full time.
Right.
How come all of a sudden he's only good enough to be there a weekend?
And these are things you can't predict.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you have that situation, not to interrupt you, now if you're the guy, you're going to be in defensive/offensive mode, because assuming the father, the guy, wants to see his kiddos, and you have a significant other who's saying no to you, that's tough. And how do you do that without becoming a explosive, bombastic, combative situation where the kids become the pawn? And now every time mom and dad are in the same room with the kids, the tension is just sparks flying everywhere, and the kids pick up on that. And it's so sad to see that. But to your point, that's very, very true. I was the complete opposite, where I was amicable and I always said it's the kids first, it's the kids first. And that to this day is the priority. And my daughter has said more than once to me, she's like, man, you and mom get along so well compared to some other kids and parents I've seen interact. It's just so nice not to have that tension. And it's
Mhm.
sad when you have those friction ridden, bombastic, combative scenarios. It's just totally, and I've witnessed it, and it's not pretty at all.
No, and I feel like our situations are very similar in that aspect, to where it's more amicable. Amicable? I don't know how to say that word. Whatever.
No worries.
But it's more calm. It's more, kind of go with the flow, focus on the kids, and that's exactly how it should be. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's probably about an 80-20 swing that it's not. I would say 20% of the time it does end up being pretty amicable and about the kids and focused on them, and
Mhm.
feelings are put out of it. And
Mhm.
the other 80% is a mix of, well, we're going to say it's about the kids, but also when I have an opportunity to jab, I'm going to jab. When I have an opportunity to throw a hook, I'm going to throw a hook. When I have an opportunity to get under your skin, I'm going to try to get under your skin. I'm going
Uh-huh.
to use and manipulate the situation here because of
Uh-huh.
the kids, kind of thing. That is more often than not the outcome here.
Yeah,
And the kids are always the power play. And unfortunately, the system is so broken. Like, it's so broken.
and it's amazing because you can go through mediation and even so when we went through our divorce, we went through mediation extensively, getting through the memo of understanding for the paperwork as well. And we went separate lawyers, each of us did our own lawyers, just have them review the paperwork, etc. And so going into the approach of the whole divorce with mediation, I think is key. The catch is with both mediation or legal is that while you're in the room in front of them, you may be playing nicely. What happens when you leave said room and you're back in the world of things? It's like when you play nicely in a meeting, then you leave your meeting, and then all of a sudden you get outside. And to your point, the fists start flying. And how do you navigate that? And there are scenarios where you have people going in, being cool, calm, collective, and coming out. And it's sad. And as a paramedic, I've been called to scenes of domestic things like that nature, where you may have a couple going through divorce, and because someone gets hit and there's a physical altercation, some areas, police are obligated to call for local medical people to come evaluate said party who's injured to make sure everything's good. And you can just see the tension. They split the parties apart and everything else. And it's just watching these worlds that started off married, happy, etc., air quotes here. And here
Mhm.
you are, X number of months, weeks, years, what have you, going through this situation that's going to be life changing for everybody involved, period.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it just sucks because our system is broken in that way, to where it's so common. Like, I'm sure responding to those calls just kind of became, fortunately, it's part of your job. It's part of
Right.
your job at that time, and some of it's routine. But I'm curious about that. How often was so I looked it up one time when I was talking to Attorney Jafari. We looked it up while we were recording, and in the UK, there's a reported statistic of 1 in 7 men are suffering from DD. That's reported. But how often on those calls that you maybe showed up for, was it ever the man get, even though the men may have looked like they were more injured, more hurt, how often was it the DV was against the man versus against the woman?
Yeah, I'd say, and based on memory, and I responded to hundreds of various variety of calls, but in general, it's almost a split down the pike, 50-50, because you get some guys who are going to be restrained and okay, but then you may have the other party, whether it be male or female, spouse-wise, that is just coming unglued. The other factor that comes into play, and thinking through this now as I go through, another underlying associated factor that contributes to all of this, especially on the domestic violence side and couples that are splitting, is the presence of substance abuse, whether it be legal or illegal. It's that the old saying is instant jerk, just add alcohol, which is the clean version of what that normally is said. But when you get people who are intoxicated and or they combine with other meds, you can have people who are acting in such a bizarre manner that now compiles onto an emotionally driven DV scenario where a person's life is falling apart because they're getting separated and or split and going down that path. So, and honestly, it's probably 50-50 where I saw who was the antagonizer versus who was the recipient of that abuse. And sometimes you don't know about it initially until you start getting into the assessment of things. Or
Mm-hmm.
the local police may say you just seen a family domestic, blah, blah, blah. And then the other factor to consider in this on a lot of those calls is you may have a situation where not only are you having to deal with two quote unquote adults who are supposedly having kids and are married, what have you, or going through divorce. Now you also have to think of the factor of the environment itself and the safety for the kids. And
Mm-hmm.
then does local law enforcement pull in social services, child protective services, et cetera, to get kids out of those situations. So again, just from a cascading of events and how these factors come together. And for guys that and they're listening to this, it's if you can keep the emotions out, or if you are emotional, don't need trigger responses, because when the emotions are triggering in, at least for me, it influences other decisions that I make. And I was on one podcast where I've said to the guy, I've seen guys make emotional decisions where they spend a whole bunch of money because they're emotionally driven. And all of a sudden look back saying, why did I do this? Or they make a decision on buying something or something else of that nature, where the next day you wake up and you're like, why did I do that? Now I'm all calm. And it's like, and so these scenarios, it's a sad situation overall. And it's part of the reason why the reverse detox touches on those type of things as well, even the emotions and the mindset, because that's such key elements for guys to try to keep. And it's easy for you and I to say this in the heat of the moment. Who knows? Honestly.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, who knows? And that impulse control can be really difficult. The best advice for that, I work in mental health, and so best advice for that is when you're feeling those impulses, whatever you're feeling that impulse toward at the very beginning of it, walk away from it. If it's sports betting, walk away. If it's spending money on something, walk away from it. If it's doing something, if it's drinking, try to walk away from it. Kind of thing. Go to sleep, take a nap, go do something. Go for a drive, go do something to where you're distracted and you can't do that thing, which
Correct.
is most likely on your phone. Step away, walk away, do the same. I am also curious about the paramedic side of things. How often, from what you had seen, your experience, of course, was it a fake call or a fluffed up call to where something happened allegedly, but didn't really happen in reality, and it was just a call to try to put one person feet to the fire kind of thing, or maybe to try to say, oh, he's doing this and so the kids aren't safe kind of thing and we need him out kind of blah 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 blah. How was that also kind of up there too?
So that's a very good question. It's very hard to answer from a pre-hospital EMT paramedic perspective, and this is based on where I worked, the systems I worked in. You get called to an assault, a domestic, what have you, and they're going to split the parties apart. And and depending upon where the person's working as a provider, you only have so much time with your quote unquote patient to assess and to determine what's going on. You may have your partner checking out the other party of that fight to get their story, and then you may come back together later on to figure out what direction to take. And the setup, if you will, of how things go, it's a he said, she said type thing.
Yeah.
And law enforcement, 99% of the time, in my experience, is already on site scene. And if they're not, you're calling for them to come because you have to have the law involved. And I think the bigger factor here is there's many factors that come into play here, because one, you have to make sure that you're in a safe environment. And this is relevant because if it's just you and your partner and you pull up on or you respond to a domestic violence and they're going at it fight wise, your situation has just increased big time, because now you're watching and witnessing the fight. And I've seen situations where you pull up and you beat the cops on the scene and they're going at it. And you're like, holy cow. And now you have to make some decisions, because domestic violence situations can escalate, as a lot of folks in mental health should know as well, because they can escalate to they say that when you're starting to fight, escalations to pulling out knives and guns. So you have to be aware of all of this.
That's how a true crime podcast happened. That's how a true episode of a true crime podcast happens next. So.
Wow. So as you're going through this,
sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. So it's one of those where we may not know the truth, and the person may be spinning the truth as well. And it also comes back to if they're under altered mental status, meaning they could be quote unquote in shock, or maybe they're intoxicated, inebriated, what have you. All these factors come into play of how this is working out, and the patient's underlying emotions. To your point earlier, if they're triggering and they're reacting and responding, are they going to now start throwing punches at the medics and or police, which I have seen, because they're emotional, they're in this thing, and if they're trying to get to your point, they want to set up where the other party's the bad guy and I want custody of my kiddos. I may be going ballistic because I want to protect. It's the whole mama bear syndrome, and I've seen things like that occur as well, and it's super sad. And in those situations, for the folks who are listening, the first priority is always the priority of all the individuals, safety of them. And then once you have the adults and making sure the kids are safe as well. And then what will end up happening is because the medical folks, we only have so much time with these patients. It's going to be up to the law enforcement, the legal system, to your point earlier, for the system to go through to figure out who was in the right and who was in the wrong. Because I'm going to finish up that call. I'm going to go back in service. I'm going to run my next call, whatever that may be. And so now my 5-minute interaction is over. I'm moving forward. And here you are years later recalling me from memory some of these DV calls that I've been on and all the factors that come into that. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but that helped give you some context to those scenarios.
No, absolutely. No, it makes sense. And I apologize to listeners for that true crime joke. It was just a joke, people. We joke. I joke here. It's okay. It's okay. It's just I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. This is a very common scenario in true crime world. Okay, where the DV happened and then everyone comes home and then someone's dead later. So it happens. It happens. Okay, it's real. True crime is true for a reason. But regardless, I digress. When mix emotions, substances, drugs, emotions, substances, psychiatric medications,
Correct.
they don't mix, right? They do not mix. And during the divorce process, most men especially are highly susceptible to a couple things: intense grief that they don't know how to process, and wanting to cope with something that's not healthy. And whether that be drugs, alcohol, possibly just getting out there and going to bars and meeting a bunch of women and having some, shallow intimacy and things like that, finding ways to cope that aren't necessarily the most healthy and whatnot. So why, within the divorce detox, why is it so important to not overlook these emotions, the emotional and the mindset need aspects of divorce?
To your point, these are emotions and mindsets are, in my opinion, massive drivers that can influence your behaviors, both to yourself and to others, can influence any other aspect of your life. And for example, when my wife and I separated and she went and got an apartment and the kids went with her to be under her roof at that time, dogs were out of the picture, pets, all of a sudden I find myself in a 4-bedroom house, and you go from having a house as busy with kids to intentional pause for the silence. Emotionally, for me, my heartstrings, I'll never forget the first few nights. It was brutal because I went from seeing my kids, being around them, to not only seeing them on occasion when we had, the parenting time, etc. And we were amicable on that side of the house. But the reality is it's those moments where the decisions you are making, where your emotions are pinging, at least for me, and mindset wise, my mind was racing all over the place. How is this going to play out? Where are we going to be at as far as how things are going to be working, and is it going to be successful? I found myself, especially going through this, where keeping pause on emotions is key. And I had instances, I'll be very candid, where I may have been emotional sending a text to my ex because of a variety of, a topic that triggered me. And instead of typing it, hitting save and draft, I went ahead and hit send, which, it is what it is. And you look back and these things happen from that perspective. And so I think for the divorce detox perspective for the guys, we include an emotional wheel in the program as well, where you start in a center and surrounding the center itself are all these emotions, and it reaches out and branches out. So it's a hub and spoke model. And a friend actually introduced this to me. His daughter was using it to get through some stuff in school and said, Paul, this emotional wheel is helpful in any situation because you can now see why these feelings are triggering these outcomes from people as they go through. And so when you have an emotion, why do I feel anxious? Why am I sitting here? My hands are sweaty and my heart's racing, and it's because your body's reacting, and being aware of this is important. And to your point, there's healthy ways to deal with this stuff and there's non-healthy ways to deal with stuff. I like to stay outside, get active, even if the weather's bad, go for a walk, just because it helps me keep a fresh mind. And I actually in the program I do add-ons, and my friend calls it the shower moments, where I'm outside and I'll do all of a sudden a quick video to guys saying, hey guys, here's X, Y, and Z. And sometimes you just want to stop by a brook and just listen to the water run. And I shoot a video intentionally because it's okay to do those outlets. Take a minute, relax, decompress, and try to unwind, because the world's crazy enough as it is. Now you're going through a life-changing event, and you want to get through. Most people want to get through successfully. I'm just trying to give guys the tool to get through successfully, because this didn't exist beforehand. And I was I had to go all over the place to get tools to figure out my divorce. And to this day, I continue to learn. This is not, the program is done. It's going to develop and we're going to do additional things. But for me, there's always other aspects of divorce that come into play. And I guess the emotional maturity is key. Easy to say.
Yeah. No, way easier to say. And I feel like, yes, we want to get through divorce successfully, right? But we also, in that time period, just
Right.
want to survive, right? We just want to survive, and we just want to get through it. We just want to get it done and over with, right? Because it is not only emotionally draining, it's
Mm-hmm.
mentally draining, it's spiritually draining, it's financially
Mm-hmm.
draining, especially for most. It's stressful. It adds just a layer onto
Mm-hmm.
everything, right? It adds so much. Just this, you go from being in a crock pot to an
Mm-hmm.
instant pot, just all of a sudden, right? To where that pressure is just so much more intense. You just feel that pressure on
Mm-hmm.
everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything. I remember from my divorce specifically, like I was about 230, and over the course of just a few months after my divorce, probably let's say four-ish months, I went from 235 down to 175,
Wow.
just super
Wow.
quickly, and that's
That's a
not healthy.
lot of
In that
a
short
lot
of
of
a time
loss very
period.
quickly, and your body is like, holy cow.
Yeah. I'm eating like one meal a day maybe, and supplementing with just tons of caffeine and tons of
Mm.
supplements
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Just to keep my body going and things like that. And I'm working a lot. At that time I worked at Lowe's. I was outside lawn and garden manager, so it was during the summertime and it was hot here in the Tri Cities and whatnot, and so it's hot. So it's like great weather to try to get lose some weight, kind of things like that. But I was losing
Mm-hmm.
weight so rapidly, and it was just I was just drained. I was so beyond drained, tired. I was out of it. I was just working and showing up, going home, taking care of kids. And at that time, I want to say we had like about a 65-35 split when my favor at that time towards the early stages of divorce and whatnot. And it was just it
Mm-hmm.
was just crazy. Just lose. I just remember that feeling of just that. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I coped. That was how I coped, was with just a little bit and called it good. Sleeping a few hours a night, just up,
Mm-hmm.
scrolling social media, recording podcasts, researching things like that. That's all I was doing, and it was just so not healthy.
And it's I think you share some very valuable insights, and for those folks who are listening to this, no two divorces are the same. And even for myself, I'll pick on me, I did not expect to experience what I experienced through the divorce process. I will never forget the day that we went to the county courthouse to get divorced. The judge says, are you sure? We went through the whole process. The judge says, are you sure you guys want to be getting divorced? We're like, yes, we're done. We can't continue on. He says, all right, we'll sign the paper, etc. And then this is the reality. You now, for me, I'm walking out of the court where I just got divorced. I will never forget opening the door, and my ex and I went our separate ways. I remember walking to my car. It was a very nice day. And this is part where the emotional level, Jay, I think is so high that it's those times when your emotions are sky high that sometimes your mind starts creating snapshots of memories and making it, embedding this in it. So here I'm looking back to what happened to me in 2013. This is one of the very few times I've ever gone back, and it's the first time I actually shared this on a podcast. So I walk out, my emotions are off the walls, and I remember walking to my car, and my ears are hypersensitive because I'm just listening. I just got divorced, and I'm saying to myself, "What's going to change?" Birds are chirping, cars are driving by. I never forget saying to myself, everything is just continuing on. Just because I get divorced, nothing in the world has changed. It's just my little issue. And then I got my car and I said, don't, just be cool, drive home, do what you're going to do, etc. But it's the awareness that you had when you're going through, how do you survive with your emotions high, and how do you do while you're working? And me walking out, just leaving that, because there may be some folks who leave the courthouse after getting divorced. And actually, I know this is the case where they go from the courthouse, they're going to go out and spend some money. They're going to go out and have a huge party because they are DIVORCED. They're divorced and they're having a party. And I know folks who have done that. And I was the complete opposite, where I was low key. I just maintained, and I didn't broadcast my divorce either. I kept it very personal, which is both good and bad. And that's when I said to myself, we're going to be mature about this whole thing and go from there. And little did I realize that walking out of the courthouse was the whole new chapter to the whole new world of being divorced official on paper in reality. And now you got a bunch of decisions to make the rest of your life regarding divorce. It was an overwhelming day for me.
Yeah, no, I can remember that day. Remember going, signing everything. The only thing I'm pretty sure that happened that afternoon was I went out to a bar with a bunch of friends, got pretty hammered, not to the point to where I was like blackout drunk, but I was definitely hungover the next day. We'll say that. That's pretty much all I remember from that day.
And
Honestly,
this is a good contrast of the different approaches. Everyone's different. Everyone's got their own, and there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone has to cope with this as they do it. And for your listeners, that's a huge. I mean, this is a great dichotomy of two different approaches. Two different people just met prior to the podcast, but we all each survived through the divorce, etc. And that's the whole purpose of having conversations like this, is to be successful and to share stories so you can see you're not alone.
100%. I would say the healthiest thing I did was I got into therapy at some point in that first year or so after the separation, before the divorce was finalized. Ours took about a year to finalize before we got everything finalized and everything. And probably the best thing I did was go through some counseling and whatnot. And I went through this specific model of counseling called grief counseling. No, sorry, not grief counseling. Sorry, forgiveness counseling, forgiveness therapy, where it was a 4-step model of forgiveness, working on forgiving others, forgiving yourself, forgiving those who have wronged you, who you think have wronged you. Just a lot of forgiveness, right? And that was very powerful. Part of it was also understanding like perspective of other people and developing an empathetic approach to the forgiveness, which was very impactful at that time, but more impactful later, to where it's a lot easier for me to try to understand like the perspective of someone who may be going through it, right? To try to, like, Paul, if you're going through it, I'm able to look, and you did something wrong for me, towards me in some way, shape, or form. And I'm like, oh, that was kind of effed up. But then I can stop, I can pause, I can reevaluate and be like, hold on. Well, we look at it here, and Paul's actually maybe he's going through divorce. Maybe he's just really struggling mentally. I don't know what he's going through. I don't know what's going on. And I'm sure this was a personal kind of thing, right? And so it helps open up that perspective to a lot of things. And also, it helps you just feel better about things, knowing that you have forgiven yourself. You're not taking that blame upon yourself anymore, because it's very easy in the divorce process, especially to blame yourself for all the things that they did. But it's not your fault if, let's say, someone was unfaithful in the marriage. It's not your fault if they were lying to you about their finances for many years, or they had an addiction of some type, or whatever the reason was. Or it's not your fault that you two grew apart. Were there some things you can control in that? Absolutely, there's some things you can control in all these situations, right? But there's less than you can. There's more you can't control than what you can control in all the situations when it comes to divorce. And so there's no point in blaming yourself. And you can forgive yourself for that blame. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to forgive someone else who's ruined, this life that you guys were creating, things like that, or essentially quote unquote ruined for whatever aspect of it was. But it takes two people to get divorced. It takes two people to get married. It takes two people to have a relationship. It takes two people to get divorced. There's always shoulda, coulda, woulda, has been.
Right. And the hindsight thing that you just looked, coulda, shoulda, woulda, you can do that all day, and it's not healthy. And to this day, I tend to force myself to not do that, because you can reflect on what happened in the past, but you have a new chapter and you're going to move forward. And I went to counseling when I was going through my divorce, because I wanted just to make sure that I was okay mentally and overall wise, and just making sure my baseline was there for me. Just, am I okay? And I went through a few sessions, and when we went through the sessions, he said, Paul, you're doing well. He says, you seem to have a good head in your shoulder, etc. And I won't get into all the details, but it keeps you even keeled. The other interesting thing I'll say as well is, you can only control what you can control. And one thing I talk about is the offense and the defensive side to a divorce. Because if you and I are triggering divorce, we're automatically on the offensive side, because we know what we want and we know what the agenda is, because we have an idea of what we want. Versus if your significant other triggers the divorce, now you're defensive mode. And the reason I say this is because you don't know exactly what he or she wants out of this whole thing, because now you're going to be playing catch up, and you can only control what you can control. You can only have visions to what you're seeing, and knowing where that baseline is and how all these pieces come together is key. And now the reason I mention this as well, regardless of whether you're on the offense or defense, and we've talked about the emotions and the mindset and the ability to regulate yourself, this is key. Because if you all of a sudden become fired up emotionally on defensive mode, and you start throwing F-bombs and fists in the cuffs and everything else, now you're in a whole different scenario versus when you're on the offense and you can approach it gingerly, hopefully, and go from there. So I think there's so many intermoving parts of this whole model. It's insane.
No, there are a lot of moving parts here, right? There's a ton of just how do you even phrase it? It's like one literally from one message to one message. Can you go from offense
Hmm.
to defense to offense
Hmm.
to defense? Um, but the best thing to do is to try your absolute best to keep it
Correct.
about the kids, right? To try to, if there's children involved, keep it about the kids. If there's not, then I don't know what to tell you because you're just going to not suffer, but you're just gonna have to kind of figure that
Correct.
one out. Because I don't know how that one works without having kids. It doesn't like it to me. It just makes sense. Like okay, you just kind of shake hands, go your separate ways, and here's half of stuff. Here's my half.
Hmm.
Here's your half. Kind of go on kind of thing.
Yeah, and the kids
Yeah.
definitely throws complexities into it, and I to this day make that the priority for me with any decision I make regarding my marriage and or divorce. And some people have said to me, why did you get divorced? And you guys seem so amicable. And someone else framed to me once is you like had a business deal gone bad. Well, you guys are better as quote unquote friends and parents versus being married. And we did the whole pretty much cut your asses down the middle and go from there. And when kids aren't involved, you are correct. The cleanest thing is 50-50, take it, walk away. However, there's people out there who it's not going to be clean. And because they're getting divorced, no kids, now I'm going to come after you for everything I can get. And I've seen, especially on social media, when people are going through divorce, some of the divorce groups out there, there's some very vicious people out there with regard, and they're in their own situation. To your point earlier, you don't know what's going on internally with these folks, but there's some very vicious things going on with regards to their plans or her plans that do X, Y, and Z, and to go from it. And it's that anxiety level you can just see ratcheting up. You're like, holy cow. And to your point, 1 second offense, then defense, back and forth. That's tough to deal with. And you figure if you're doing all this, and I'll never forget where when I was going through my divorce, I'd be in a meeting at work knowing that I had to go to mediation or something later on. And people like keep separate. Well, it's not easy. It's an emotional topic. And if you're at work discussing stuff and all of a sudden divorce starts trickling to your head, it clouds things up, honestly. And can make it very challenging to focus because divorce impacts all aspects of your life, in my opinion, period.
I couldn't agree with that more because it does impact all the parts of your life. It
Hmm.
impacts your work. It impacts your social relationships. It impacts your friendships, your family relationship. For you, how were your family relationships? Like not with your children specifically, but like with extended family and people around you, friendships, close friends, family members. Like how were those relationships impacted post divorce or
Great
going through the
question.
divorce?
So my immediate family, I have siblings and brother and two parents. They were disappointed. They were disappointed for me, meaning they empathized. They were disappointed that marriage wasn't going to survive. But I also have a sibling who got divorced prior to my divorce, so we got to see that aspect play out as well. But they were fairly so the family side. So the family was supportive. They understood the process. I didn't share a lot of details with them for a variety of reasons. Friend side wise, it was interesting because a couple of my friends, because of their own life situations, moved out of town, which made it tough keeping in touch with them. And I had a very close friend who I confided in and shared information. He was also going through divorce, and so we were going through this. And I think during that time process, he unfortunately didn't. He unfortunately died while I was going through and he was my anchor point. And for me, losing that resource was really really tough. And I had some other friends in town that I also reached out to. And the reason I mentioned the fact that you have a friend who passes away during this process, why it's significant, because when you say you have a best friend, he was my best friend, and that was a loss that really focused me to say who else can I entrust in. And I intentionally reached out to a couple different people to talk about divorce and the process of that. And we had our little village of our family, right? And you have your village where your kids start making friends, and you have become friends with other couples. We over time kind of splintered off, and I do recall at one point when we were going through divorce, one of the guys made a comment to another guy that got back to me eventually. He's like, man, Paul looks so uptight and he looks so intense. And they said, well, he's going through divorce and his work funding wise is stressed. So that's probably, and I wasn't aware that I was acting in this manner. And I got this feedback and I was like, oh, I'm trying to be this chill, laid back guy. And like, well, just notice, man, you look super intense and stressed all the time. And it's not much fun. And so it was impacting relationships with friends as well. My college roommate and I, he's divorced as well. So he and I keep in touch. And it does change relationship because some people don't want to talk to you anymore. You're divorced. I don't believe in divorce. We're done. Other people are like, man, I am so sorry to hear about that. I get it. And so they were there. And to this day, I keep in touch with those individuals. We talk from time to time. And one very good friend from college, he's divorced as well. And we have similar stories going back and forth. So I think my family itself got it. And to this day, they often ask, like, how's your ex and how's this? And I'll describe to them, because she and I are still in touch, and friend wise, there's not much left to discuss about the ex, because it is what it is. You move forward and go from there. So overall, nothing surprising. I do know of some people who've been through divorce or their families disown them. I also know families that own them and embrace the child for going through divorce. It is what it is. And I know some folks who have had friends went through divorce and they have lost all their friends just because their friends, for whatever reason, didn't believe it, what have you. And now they're not only getting divorced from their spouse, essentially they're getting divorced from their entire social network, which is a huge loss.
Yeah. No, that's something that's not really talked about, right? For me personally, I pushed more people away than I let in. I kind of lone wolfed it and kind of went about it my own way, where people would reach out, I would ignore them. People would reach out, I would block, not actually block them, but I would just, ignore them, not talk to them, and just kind of, live my own life and do my own thing, figure it out my way, right? And that was how I chose to handle it. I definitely regret that. I definitely could have used more people to talk to and had more of those outlets and had better relationships with people. Would say some of those relationships are gone. Like I don't have them anymore. And so that's tough to look back and be like, man, if shoulda, coulda, woulda, right?
Right.
So it's all hindsight, right? Hopefully if it doesn't happen to them, but if it does, I'll be able to be there for them and hopefully, try to repair that relationship when the time comes, if the time ever comes, kind of thing, right? So, but no, I definitely. Oh, go ahead.
And I think what we're check. This is super important because not only do you get divorced from your significant other, you're getting divorced, but you and I are both going through an experience where our divorce not only impacted our marriage and the relationship with the kids, it does impact relationship with others, and people, in my opinion, they underestimate that. Because you may have had some relationships, and as did I, that were golden for years, and they're no longer there. And how do you continue on down that path? Because especially when and lone wolfing it, and I wasn't reaching out too much as well. I took more of a approach than you did. When they were reaching out to me, I was like, yeah, we'll see how this goes. But how do you continue on? And for guys that are going through this, you have to think of how are you going to survive? Because you may have to make a whole new network of friends, and it could be a whole new chapter.
Yeah, and it's multiple chapters after that too, because it's hard to make these friendships and to sustain these friendships because life moves on, life goes on for everybody. People move, people get into new relationships. So if you were with some single dudes and now the single dudes are in relationships, it's hard to maintain those relationships, right? Or if your friends that you were connected to, they're all married now, and now you're the one that's not married, so now you're the third, fifth, seventh wheel.
You're just gonna say odd man out.
It's like you're the odd man out. It's like, and then people are trying to hook you up with their cousins or their sisters and all these other random people. It's like, yeah, I'm good, kind of thing. And it's just, it's just a mess. You really have to reestablish a lot of social connections. A lot of social connections have to be reestablished, and that
can be tough.
So, yeah, because no one wants to make friends as an adult.
And as when you have kiddos and a lot of my friends came because I had kids and we do sporting events or birthday parties and you're hanging out talking to other couples and their spouses and things, and that's how you get a lot of friendship to evolve. And it's that whole friendship, people say every 3 to 5 years friends tend to come in and come out, and how that plays out. And divorce is no different. It's just now you have the big divorce factor in the entire equation for the rest of your life, and how's that going to play in? And to your point, even getting new relationships. My girlfriend, we've been together for a couple of years. She has a kiddo, but she's never been married. And so she's learning about the reality, air quotes, of divorce and how it impacts. She's like, really? You guys do this, that? Just because those inner workings, if you don't know about divorce you've been through, you don't know.
Yeah, it can be weird to someone who hasn't experienced it before, too.
Correct.
And may not understand it at the same level, too.
Exactly.
It's definitely complicated. And it adds a lot of layers to relationships and things like that. It adds a lot of layers. Last question here, and then we'll have some fun. Divorce is pretty commonly looked at as, oh, well, we got married, we're going to get divorced. This is kind of part of the natural progression of things. Unfortunately, it's kind of taken on that mindset to where it's not rare anymore, and kind of an extreme need. There's many reasons behind that. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with, but we don't have to get into that side of everything. You specifically talk about in the Divorce Detox that it's an opportunity for personal development. How can men specifically start to shift this perspective to see divorce in this light?
You have your world where you did activity-wise, and you did stuff as a family. And when you go through divorce, this is an opportunity for a new chapter. And I will use myself as an example of this, where I am now doing things where I didn't normally do them in the past. For example, I didn't go out to dinner as often as I am now because for whatever reason, I was saying, but now I have someone to do things with. and I'm eating more ethnically diverse foods from different parts of the country. And we're going to those hole in the wall restaurants. And it's a new chapter. And so we're going to social events and gatherings where I would not have attended in the past. And I'm not a big person who goes to things as a party of one. I'd rather go as a party of two. And I would never have gone to some of these events in my previous, when I was married, just because it wasn't a focus of it. So this literally for me is a brand new chapter. And guys are going to be presented with an opportunity where you can now do things that you might not have done in the past. And that's okay. And even things like downsizing a house and getting an apartment with a significant other versus staying in your existing place is going to be a new change for guys, realizing that, to your point, divorce, divorce, divorce. All right, it's common, but now it's a new chapter, and there may be a whole new way. Because if you didn't do it in the past, why can't you do it going forward? Why can't you try things? And so for me, if anything, I think it's been a little bit more of an opening of, wow, there's a whole world out there. I'm going to try to learn a little bit more about it. And my siblings have actually mentioned to me, wow, it's like the new Paul, because now he's got some, I never had a skin routine before, a skincare routine. I'll be honest. I got introduced to a skincare routine by my girlfriend. And prior to this, I never had it. My sisters were like, well, your skin looks like healthier. I'm like, well, why didn't you say something early along those lines? So it's those new avenues you go down and a new opportunity that I just wasn't aware of it. Because if you don't know, you don't know. So I think that that's the aspect for guys going through it. And yes, divorce can be a bummer. It can be sad. It can be tough. But on the same token, it's a new chapter, new opportunity. And you may find yourself in new relationships and things that are so enriching and fulfilling that it's awesome and it's a win.
Yeah, no, it can be. It definitely can be. And I think it's definitely an opportunity for some self-reflection. It's an opportunity to try new things. It's an opportunity to get out of your comfort zone, because your comfort zone that you had is literally gone. The comfort zone you had is gone.
It blew up.
Blew up, and now you have the opportunity to recreate that comfort zone, to try new things, to get out there, to meet new people, and to try new things. So I think it's really important, and it's opportunity to start taking care of yourself more, because now you have more time essentially to take care of yourself. Men, we take care of, we provide, we do all these things. We don't take care of ourselves, and so with the divorce, you have this opportunity to kind of reinvent what that taking care of yourself looks like, and to take care of yourself more, and to do more things for yourself, which is really important. Anything else that you want to add here before we jump into wrapping this thing up?
Sure. No, I think for the folks that are listening, you can read about divorce. You can go through any program that's out there. Your situation is going to be unique. And the best thing from my perspective, you have kids, make kids the focus, go through it, realize that not everything is going to be a straight line. There's going to be zigzags, and that's okay. And the other aspect, it's okay to ask for help, which I should have done more. The other thing is I would encourage guys, especially if you're going through research and find out what's going on, and take care of you. To Jay's point, take care of yourself, because if you're not functioning, then the rest of what you touch isn't going to be your true self doing it, because you're not functioning at your 100%. And that's key to be able to function 100%. Otherwise, you may be missing stuff. And it sounds easy to say, but there's some little things, especially when it comes to kiddos, where you may miss opportunities and you look back and go, damn, I wish I did X, Y, and Z. So, wrapping up, I just say be aware that it's not a straight line. There's going to be pivots, turns, etc., and just take them at the best you can and try to keep an even keel as you go.
Love that. That's great. So do you have any humorous moments from your time as a paramedic?
Any call that involved adult toys was always humorous. And I won't get into the details for a variety of reasons. Those are always humorous. Other humorous things.
I'm guessing some of those adult toys were stuck in the wrong places.
Correct. And so you have that. And then the other ones would be, you get called to an adult entertainment center, and it would be a police car on scene, and you pull up an ambulance to check out a person inside the adult entertainment center, and music's playing, etc. And you come out of said establishment, and I'm recalling this completely. And now there's fire trucks and additional police cars, because everyone knows the address. They know they can go and, quote unquote, air quotes, help you out. So yeah, this is back in the day. So they show up, just to provide some quote unquote cover, because you're an adult entertainment place. And all of a sudden you walk in, X, Y, and Z come out, like, oh, half the world's here. And people are like, yep, how's it going in there? And you're like, oh, this, and it was very funny just how it all played out, because yes, we're all humans, and the old saying, nothing good ever happens after midnight. So just and especially as the paramedic role, you see it. Those were very funny, and it's kind of interesting how those two pop in my head out of all the things I've seen in the years, right?
So adult toys and strip clubs. All right, got it. I'll put names to them.
Paul takes the high road.
I'll take the higher road here, and I'll say it's sex toys and strip clubs. So we'll fine. You also, from what I understand, you enjoy cycling and inline skating.
Uh-huh.
How did you get into these activities?
So inline skating, I grew up playing ice hockey back east, and
Okay,
over
makes sense.
time I switched to the inline side of things. And to this day, I inline skate, and I also use trekking poles. About 10, 15 years ago, a buddy of mine introduced me to trekking, and you go super fast, and it's awesome. And I try to inline skate if I can one day a week. Weekends, especially if the weather's decent, I'll get out and go for a nice long skate. And then the cycling itself, I've always been kind of active with the various things. And when I came to Colorado, I discovered mountain biking, which was
Okay, yeah.
fun. And that transition, exactly. And then
If you're in Colorado, you have to like. It's a part of the moving package there to where it's like, welcome to Colorado.
you get a bike and a Subaru, right? Yeah, and I have a Subaru as well. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And then the road cycling transition, it was like going mountain bikes for me is like a tank. They're slow, they're bulky because they're designed to be off road. But then the road cycling is like getting into a sports car because they're light and they're fast, and it's you have a blast. And I used to do big rides and everything, century rides. We do 100 miles in a day, and years ago I did all this stuff, and it's just fun. And for me, that was an outlet through my divorce as well, to be very candid. My kids would show up at my house, they'd be like, "Hey mom, where's dad?" And we were separated, like, "Dad's not at the house." And she would say, "Is his bike there?" And like, "Nope." He's like, "Well, he's out for a ride." And so it was that commonplace at the time.
That's awesome. That's great. Great to have those outlets.
Exactly.
What has been the most surprising or rewarding aspect of developing Divorce Detox?
The most surprising and rewarding aspect of this program is every conversation I have, something new pops up that I did not expect to have happen. And I am not alone. The need for tools for guys is huge. And I've even had women who have approached me saying, for example, my brother's going through divorce. He's not going to buy this thing or do it or use these tools. However, as the sibling, I can see he needs this. So I want him to have access to this. And so it's not just the guys that are approaching me, it's the ladies who are coming to me saying, this is so needed. And because it's a unique perspective, it's a guy's spin on the whole divorce thing. And to me, the fact that people, just like you and I are talking through, there's so many layers of divorce that it's needed. And I completely underestimated the actual need for a tool and the resources to help people get through all of the nuances. So for me, it's been a refreshing, reassuring experience, and a surprise, because every podcast I've done, every conversation, it flows and just flows and flows. So that's, to me, I think, is very rewarding. A challenging part of this whole thing is I can't capture everything I want to. You can only do so much, and there's so many nuances and things. And the other thing I have learned, my mentors have said this is stage one, and they have additional stages for this, developing a certification for this to make it a course, and to take this whole thing and approach a judge or a divorce lawyer and have this as part of the divorce process going forward. Because when I went through my divorce, I didn't have to go. I went through a parenting divorce type course, but nothing where the guy had to go through things specifically. And the analogy that was made of that, when people get DUIs, a lot of places force them to go to AA classes, things like that. Why not build in the need to go to a program where you're going through a life-changing situation and go through and check out all the boxes?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I continue for your continued success in getting that in front of a judge and getting in front of divorce attorneys, because I feel like it's really important. Both sides need that support. Both sides need to know how to navigate the process, and then to navigate the after, because the world keeps spinning, world keeps going on, and we have to learn how to go with it, and learn how to reestablish ourselves, and learn how to reestablish everything, every part of our identity as well. So those are all very important things. Very, very final question here before I close. What advice would you offer to a young dad who's age 18 to 22? I became a dad at 22, who is just starting out his fatherhood journey. So one piece of advice that you would offer him.
2 layers. 1, take care of you. 2, if you have kiddos, make them the focus going forward, because you already have a relationship with your spouse. Take care of your kiddos. The kiddos are important.
Love it. Well, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, valuable insights, laughing with us, joking with us today. Divorce is undoubtedly a challenging journey, but with resources like Divorce Detox, men can navigate the transition with greater confidence and clarity. For listeners who want to learn more about Divorce Detox or connect with Paul, they can do so at www.divorcedetox. Is it 2 X's?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Divorce Detox was, yep.
Perfect. With 2 X's, divorcedetox.com. There you'll find comprehensive guidance to help you through every step of the divorce process. Any other places that they can find you, connect with you, that you want to mention, or is it?
They can email me at info@divorcedetox.com as well.
Perfect. I love it. Well, Paul, again, thank you so much for joining me, despite all the ups and downs that we had today.
Made it through. We made it through.
We did it. Thank you all for tuning in to the Young Dad Podcast. Remember, even in the toughest times, there's a potential for growth and transformation. Stay strong, support one another, and until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.
And that's it, Paul.
Awesome.
So now this will upload, and then I'll mush them together, and
Okay.
yeah, all that fun stuff. So